Good evening and welcome to our Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting of December the 8th. We'll call this meeting to order now. I'd like to recognize a few members of council. Our Mayor, Jeff Jordan, is with us. Councillor Cadwell and Councillor Sharp are with us tonight. Thank you for joining.
Hello, everyone.
Is there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Before we approve the agenda, I would just like to note that we would like to move item 6B under reports to come immediately after 4A, the delegation. So we're going to move that so we can discuss that part of the report right after the delegation. So if I could get a first and a seconder for the approval of the minutes, moved by Olia and seconder. Okay, Kate. Thanks, Kate.
Sorry, that was approval of the agenda?
Yeah, that's the approval
Not
of
the
the
minutes.
agenda.
Not the minutes.
No, did I say minutes? I stand corrected. Sorry.
Thank you.
Approval of the agenda. Sorry. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. All right. We have a delegation with us tonight. Bert Peters of 810 Ontario Street. Welcome, Bert. We'll give you the floor. You have approximately 10 minutes to let us know what you have to tell us. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I am Bert Peters. I'm a co-owner of the property at 810 Ontario Street. And I'd like to give you my perspective on the Heritage Committee recommendation. I'm really impressed by the thoroughness of the report, and I found the historical context of Ontario Street really interesting. But my interest is on the future use, the maintenance, and the economic value of this property. And I do understand the conflict in preserving Grimsby's small town flavor versus the pressure to develop business and residences. But I've really been feeling chagrined to having to run across this. So at this point, with this property, I'm tiring of the responsibility and the impossible expense of keeping the house in reasonable condition. So in anticipation of a possible sale of the property, we participated this report in order to remove impediments to the future owner or developer of the property. To begin with, I do recognize the Italian and Victorian detail in the construction of the house. But as the report itself points out, there is no high degree of craftsman, artistic, or technical merit in the structure. In fact, many of the features pointed out are badly in need of repair, requiring great expense and a good deal of craft. The decorative brackets pointed out lie under a wooden fascia which has rotted and pulled away from the roof, creating spaces for generations of squirrel families to enter. The whole roof needs to be replaced as shingles have begun to fall off and we've been patching leaks. On the other end, the original cut stone foundation has large holes which invite mice, and even though we've had pest control down a few times, they keep coming back. Secondly, the report acknowledges there is no investigation of the interior, which is of even more importance to the owner, myself, and the occupants of the house. Most of the walls are lath and plaster and only held up by wallpaper. So that's about the only thing sometimes that I think keeps the ceiling from coming down. There's no insulation. The heating costs of this property are ridiculous. I mean, the house was built, as you know, a long time ago. And back in those days, no insulation was put in. The next thing, the report talks about the neighborhood as a once thriving center for the fruit industry, developed by notable citizens of the past. So we learned that the house is distinctive as a duplex, as housing to support the people who used to work in that industry. But there isn't any such trade now. And the house is home to only 4 people, which is a very inefficient use of space for a region in need of housing. As far as other historical buildings, next door and across the street, at least 2 have been replaced by modern square structures. So the effect is a nondescript neighborhood. It is no Niagara on the Lake. You folks are mostly, I think, familiar with that first block of Ontario Street as we come down Main Street. Nothing really special there. So I wonder sometimes if the town would intend to put up any kind of plaques or distribute walking maps with notions for history buffs. Otherwise, you'd never know anything like that was there. So I really appreciate the mandate of the Heritage Committee and the importance of history. I really do. I love this town. It's my hometown. And I do understand the responsibility of the Planning Committee to integrate past and present and consider the needs of the community, present and future. It's not an easy task. I understand that. I've been speaking with the Planning Committee and people there for about 1.5 years now. But I'd like to remind you, if I could, that as one of the owners of this property, I'm the one who's most affected by your decision, as I'm charged with the financial future of our old house and of our family. And I think this is really the main thrust of what I really want to tell you folks tonight is, yeah, it's an old house, and yeah, it's of historical importance. As I mentioned, I really appreciate the report, but the upkeep of the house and what has to be done to it is beyond what I really would like to do. So I'd like you to keep this, in consideration when you designate this property. And if you could take a look at it. It's only really been looked at from the street, from the outside. But when you look at it from behind, or when you look a little closer, it's not really the way that it's described in this particular report. I mean, it is that way, but the upkeep is really considerable. That's really what I wanted to tell you. I mean, I could go on, but you don't want to hear any more. So that's the argument that I have. And if you do need more information, I'd be happy for you to get in touch with me and give you any more details that you may need. It's kind of a big deal to me. My mom and dad lived in that house for a long time. I'm very fond of it. We've kept it. My mom died in 2012, but it's getting to be a little too much. So thank all of you very much for listening to me. I really appreciate it, and I hope you'll keep what I've mentioned tonight in mind. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Peters? Seeing none, thank you again.
Sure.
You're welcome to stay on as an audience. We will ask for a mover and a seconder for this delegation to be received. Councilor Bothwell? No, sorry, that's Oya. And seconder, yeah, Councilor Bothwell. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. So we'll move on to item 6B, the draft designation research report for 810 Ontario Street. And Bianca, did you want to speak on that?
Through the chair. So I just wanted to talk a little bit on the report itself and our evaluation against the Ontario regulation of 906. Mr. Peters talked on it a little bit before. So the main significance for this dwelling is coming from its context along Ontario Street. It showed that multiple housing was required, which directly showed the prosperity of not only Ontario Street, but Grimsby itself, as the Grand Trunk Railway Station gave us an opportunity to ship fruit much further than we ever could before. So the building really does help to share the story of what happened along that streetscape. And through the Ontario Heritage Act, it's not all about the condition and what it looks like. It's part of the Ontario regulation, but there's different portions that you can score in. And in this case, this is high historical value and high contextual value. And because of that, we as staff recommend designation, as well as we have a peer review from a CAP certified heritage professional who agrees with our recommendation for designation. So I'm not sure if any of the committee members have any questions or.
Councillor Bothwell?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, Bianca. You mentioned that this is unique in Grimsby, this type of duplex home, and especially on Ontario Street. Are there any other duplexes across from the current art gallery library along Carnegie or around that block? Are there any other duplexes of this age, purpose-built duplexes on that street? I'm just thinking because I seem just from driving by and remembering that there's a number of older homes that look like, and I don't know if they've been in the modern day converted or if they were structurally built as well, purpose-built.
Through you, the chair. Yeah, we were just discussing here that there may be another one up the road that wasn't intentionally built. I know a lot of older homes tend to become multi-residential, but yeah, one of the key factors in this is that it was intentionally built this way. So we believe there's one up the road, but that just strengthens the argument of having the need for multiple housing along that street.
Thank you.
See no further questions. I have a resolution. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend that 810 Ontario Street be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Act. So I need a mover for that. Can I get a mover? Yep, thank you, Olia. And a seconder, Kate. All in favor? That's carried. I think I got it right now. That's good. Okay, thank you. So we'll move to item number 5 now on the agenda, which is the update and activity sheet. I guess I'll turn it over to, Bianca. Thank you.
Thank you. So through the chair, I'm just going to share the screen so we can go over them. I did highlight them in yellow on the agenda, so I don't know if anyone had any specific questions. We can quickly go over them. Sorry. So 141 We have completed the report with correspondence from the archives as well as edits from the committee. And we've done that for 141, 147, and of course we just did 8 to 10. 122 Main Street East, we discussed the curtilage last time, and we just updated that there. 130 and 104 will be talked about in the meeting, but that just is an update that the reports have been updated with the edits from the community, and 224 as well. This is for the designation plaques. So we are working with, as per our discussion at the last meeting, we're working with Burlington Signs to confirm the plaque design with the potential of having the town crest. So we were hoping to have an updated quote for this meeting, but it looks like they're going to need some more time to work with production to see if there be a change, and if we can also fit more letters onto the plaque. So we sent them kind of a sample of what we're thinking, and then once we get the quote update, we'll bring those designs and the quote to the January meeting. The other plaques, we're actually still waiting on Ontario 1 to confirm the locations, so I'm hoping to move that along before the frost comes, but we will be looking to make sure the funds are allocated for that. The town website, we have begun digitalizing the designations, and we have all the newest ones ready to go to be uploaded. The Heritage Register, we're still waiting for submission from the committee. And then 242 has sent in photographs, and staff is reviewing them, and we'll be circulating them to the committee shortly. And then 78 Livingston, and I believe there's a couple other properties. We're just working on the research for them. For 36 and 38, we began researching the gate out front and the house. And we're also talking with our Public Works Department to see if there's anything we can do for the maintenance they do along the fence to ensure that there's some protection to the heritage materials.
We confirmed it's not in our right.
And we confirmed it's not in our right of way. So it is on the property. And then I just have some updates from the last meeting we talked about. So 242, 48, we have confirmed that 242 will be retained, and I'll be circulating the updated notice to the committee for review. The register and designation brochures, we received your correspondence and we're looking through it, and we're hoping to bring that as a discussion item in January. We've confirmed the Queen's Lawn Cemetery gates are designated. They may still be on the registered list, but we're in the process of cleaning that up and hopefully bringing that in the new year. 133, we've reached out to the property owner to ensure that the foundations will be secured for the winter. We just let them know our concerns with the freeze thaw cycle and with the potential of having the deep pits. We just want to make sure that there's not going to be substantial settlement. We are looking at the National Trust website for the designation report so we can find the discrepancy between what the trust is showing and what we have as designated. I have looked into 239. So we've looked in the meeting minutes, and I can confirm that designation report was started, and there's a lack of, on our side, we haven't had a ton of success looking for research. So we are going to be opening that back up now, and we'll add that to our list of houses to pursue designation, and we will reach out to the archives and see if they have anything. And then we just have an update again on the plaque designs. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about that. Sorry, stop sharing. Sorry.
That's okay, Bianca. I couldn't see anybody for the report, but I see Olia's hands up. Olia, go ahead, and you want to ask Bianca?
Just a couple questions. Bianca, thank you for the updates. One that I thought I was hoping we could bring forward for discussion at maybe a future meeting. just in going through the process of reading through the draft designations and the back and forth with edits and that, I was just hoping that we could, as an agenda item, have a discussion around helping the committee better understand the framework of the report itself, just because when I noticed, let's say a spelling mistake that needed to be corrected, I noticed that there were certain paragraphs that were literally duplicated at points in the report. So I'd just like to get a better understanding of, the beginning section looks to be kind of like an executive summary type of thing. And then there's, the section that's kind of more table formatted to follow, I think, the designation merit analysis section. So I just was hoping that we could have a conversation to help the committee better understand, which elements of the report are critical for the purpose of advancing designation and which ones are kind of the nice to haves, which might help us make the kind of the review and edit process a little bit more efficient, because I'm sure you can appreciate that there was a lot of back and forth. So I just think that would help kind of better understand, what's critical in that report and what's kind of the I guess the nice to have. And then the other question I had around 240, 248, just wanted to clarify what you said there. Does that mean that the application has confirmed that it will be submitted and therefore you'll be reaching out to the committee for comments soon? I know it came to our meeting last month and we didn't have a chance to fully, analyze and discuss, but are you saying that means that it will be coming imminently and we should make sure that we've looked at that and be ready to comment at an upcoming meeting?
Through the chair. Yeah, so they have submitted their application and the planning justification report had an error in the retaining of the houses, but it looks like all three will be retained. And we will be circulating it and we'll work on the date so that we can make sure you have enough time to review all the documents, and those will be sent around. And as for the questions about the designation report, so the 906 criteria helps us to form the statement of significance. So that's why a lot of the information is carried over. So if we have edits in one area, we can bring those edits to the other, make sure that they're the same. But in the new year, we're going to bring forward the designation report format and just make sure we're all on the same page with that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Kate, you have a question?
Through you, Councillor Gunsel. I was just curious about on the list you talk about waiting for the listed heritage suggested buildings, and also you talked on the designation, some of the houses that we're looking at designating. Is this the time that we would discuss adding certain houses, or could we do it later in this meeting?
Were you looking for submissions at the meeting, Bianca, or were you expecting us to send them in to put on the agenda?
Sure.
Does it matter? Go ahead.
Through the chair, yes, we can take suggestions from you now about adding them to the list. And then also in the future, if you want to send them through email, we can add them as an agenda item to talk about.
Okay, I just want to clarify a few things. On the house on 36 Ontario Street, we originally brought that forward as a house to put on the list, and the homeowner decided that they didn't want to be on our the inventory list, right? And then we looked and we discovered that the fence was from the 1870s. The house actually is like there's a newspaper article that Wayne Mullins found that the house is actually potentially 100 years or 50 years older, 50 years older than the fence itself. And the fence itself is around the 1870, late 1870s. So but also there is a barn on that property, a rock barn. So the fence is very important. There is a rock barn that is very rare in Ontario on 36. So in this designation business, like we've been talking about it, I see the fence is there. The barn doesn't seem to be there, and the house doesn't seem to be there. I know I pushed the fence and the barn are key because they're so rare, so absolutely rare, and which leads me to we've talked about in the last 2 years that we felt that this list, this heritage list, a do not demo list, kind of, or without a flag, we just felt like we were spinning, like just adding houses without a plan. It just didn't seem, when we started this, that there was a system in place. We're just adding houses for the heck of adding houses. And because we have an issue with staffing, you guys are so busy, and it just seems to bottleneck. And at a recent council meeting, our committee of the whole, we talked about all the tools that we have to protect our buildings along our homes, along Main Street, and and one of them was designation, but it's a long process. Like all these tools that we have are very long processes. Like we have a lot on our agenda right now, but if you look at our minutes and you look where they started, it's like over a year ago that a lot of these are started. So it's a great tool, but it takes a long time to protect something. And so that made me think about the system that we have to put these houses on this. And I thought, is there a more strategic way to look at protecting our houses? And one of the things we talked about when we started talking about this fence at 36 is that what are our points of difference in Grimsby? What are the things that are rare in Grimsby? And starting there as more of an obvious place to start, opposed to just randomly picking houses in neighborhoods that we don't even know the history of, and we're a little bit blind. And that's when the conversation started about the fact that the rock houses that we have are so few and far between, where I've got a reference to 1851. Grimsby had 10 stone homes, and 10 years later we had 3 more, and 30 years later that's kind of a crazy one because they combined us with Wentworth County, but it says we had 22, which probably we only had 15. But in comparison, in 1851, Dundas would have had 28 and Ancaster would have had 16, but they jump in those times to like 61 in 1890, and Hamilton had 150 because our rock in Grimsby doesn't build homes very well. And so I personally feel like, and when I look at our list through our binder and through what I could find online, we don't have very many. And maybe we should start there by protecting them. And I looked through, just trying to figure it out, because our listing for designations are a little incomplete. And it looks like I made a list including fences, and there's 6 of them on the list that are designated, 6 of them, and my list, and I should take a couple away because I put fences on there too. But I have a list of, I think, about 18 rock houses in Grimsby. I could be missing some, and 6 of them are designated, and the rest of them are on do not demolish. But I would start trying to preserve these rock houses that we don't have any, where Hamilton has, like in 1891, they had 324 of them because their rock is better than our rock. Ours is shaly, and we had like 15, and so we've lost some of them, but a lot of them we still have. And so I'd love to, instead of just randomly picking Kidd Street, and because the houses look like they're from an Eaton's catalog, I'd say, what are our points of difference in Grimsby that we can use to market and brand ourselves and build our tourism and build all these things like we have. And like the rock houses was the obvious, because I think it's one of our rarest things that we have. But we've got our fruit barns. right? That would be great for tours, and we've got like some neat outbuildings too. We've got some cobbler buildings where they build shoes. We've got like, I don't know where, like I didn't know where they were, but I bet you they'd be a great map, like a tour map for tours and for history buffs. And and Olia mentioned recently bells, you know, our bell, like, do we have some historic bells here that might be neat? We have the Loyalist home, we have Prohibition. We were huge there. I bet you we have some neat houses that might blend well. Like I just was wondering if we could be a little bit more strategic with the houses we are designating. And I 100% agree with the Main Street East ones of recent, but I just feel like we need a system that makes it less easy to fight it too. Like, you can't fight that we should be preserving these beautiful rock buildings because they're so rare. And so that's what I would like to bring forward.
Thanks, Kate. Can I turn to Antonetta for some advice there? Because, I mean, every community must have that desire to look out into their community to see what they should be putting on the registry or taking something from the registry and designating it. But what is the system, or is there such a system available? So Antonetta, I'm sure you can help us there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. And thank you, Kate, for the comments. I think, you know, it's one of the first things, if you recall, that I mentioned at my first meeting with this committee was we really need to prioritize and we need to understand what the strategy is so that we can focus our efforts and our limited resources in that direction. Adding things on an inventory and what to add are really left up to each individual community. You use the 3 criteria in the Act as your guiding principles, but it's really up to the community to decide. Something can be added to the inventory by the Heritage Committee, by a staff member, and may also be nominated by the public. So I think, you know, hearing the rock houses from you, that's great feedback. That's a starting point where we can start to add properties to the inventory. You're correct in that designation does take a lot more time, but listing doesn't take that much more time. Adding properties to the inventory, it's not expected that you have a fulsome report. In fact, I can share some previous templates. They could be 1 to 2 pages long. So that can be done fairly quickly, and that at least gives us the 60 days against demolition. More than that, if anything were to happen and a heritage impact assessment were to come forward, we could then gather all the information on the history of that property through those tools. But at a bare minimum, we want our inventory to be robust to give it the minimum level of protection that we can afford it under the Act. And then again, as a committee, we're going to have to say, and this is why I talked about understanding your priorities as a committee in terms of designation, and then really working collaboratively with staff to say, where are we going to focus our efforts? What do we want to focus our attention on in terms of designation? In some communities, they pick things that might be under threat through like proposed developments. It might be an area that is completely rare. It might be an area that helps promote tourism or houses that help do that. So I think that's exactly the conversation that I alluded to in October, was really sitting down with this committee, understanding what the priorities are and starting to focus our efforts in that direction. So thank you for bringing that attention. I think that, again, to the committee's attention, we will have that conversation in January and have a clear, I know you have a work plan, but in looking at it, and I might be wrong, it doesn't really specify designations and listings, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we need to do that because that's really one of the #1 ways we can help to preserve the heritage here in Grimsby. The other question about sort of the fence, the house, and then the barn at the back. When we designate something under the Ontario Heritage Act, we designate real property. So everything would be included in that designation. And we can certainly outline the features, could be the fence, the house, and the barn, and sometimes it could be the landscape or whatever the case may be. So we don't have to limit it to just one resource. And even if it just had the fence, as long as it meets any one of the 3 criteria given under to us under 906, we can proceed with designation. And, you know, sometimes, as we see, owners may disagree. They may ask council to remove them from the inventory or not to designate them, but really that final decision rests with council. And what staff and the committee could do is say, we've used criteria 906 to evaluate the properties. The other piece I would like to mention is that some of our reports, they're getting very, very long. And, you know, I think we need to focus on our committee. conversation, another January conversation we wanted to have was, we want to advance as many designations as possible. And yes, we want them to be thorough and complete. But at the same time, once we've met the criteria for 906 and we're confident that we can defend it, everything else might be a nice to have, but not really a necessity. So do we really want to slow down designations for that? And I think, Olia, that goes to your point as well, where the committee can focus their editing attention. But at the same time, I think what we'd like to bring forward are some new streamlined templates where we don't have to put everything in the kitchen sink in there. Certainly, it's good to have in the files, and we would never say no to additional information. But at what expense? Because if we keep delaying the designation reports because this new piece of information came up, I think as long as we're confident we've met the criteria for 906, it's defensible, we should move forward with designation. So those would be some of the recommendations that we would have and some of the things that we wanted to talk about in January with the committee to really develop a strategy, tease out the work plan a bit more and understand our priorities and where we want to focus our efforts as a committee and as staff. So I thank you for bringing that up. I think we share a lot of the same sentiments, and I'm hoping that we can really leverage that January meeting as a work plan and prioritization meeting. Yes, looking at your existing work plan, but I'm also concerned a little in there that designations are a key component of that. And again, I may have missed it. It was very brief, my review of it, but let's talk about that and figure out where we want to put our priorities forward. Does that answer your questions? You said a lot, so I may have missed it, but please follow up with any other questions you might have.
Seeing no further questions, I have a resolution here to receive the.
I've got my hand raised. I've got my hand raised.
Okay.
I've got it both on the participant screen. Can you not see the raised hand?
I don't have the participant screen on because we haven't been using it, but I'll turn it on. Sorry.
Like so that you can see the raised hands. Otherwise,
yes, I've got it on now. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I was
Right.
looking around and looking. I didn't see the hand. Sorry.
I was trying to be polite.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
So I just have a question, Bianca, and I appreciate Antonetta's comments about working with us on the designation, picking heritage buildings to put on the municipal register. And yeah, that is in the work plan. And we do have, we had put a target, I think, of at least one per month or something to add to the register. So we'd put a target in there, but we also put in there that we wanted to work with you guys on how to establish a framework for making those selections. And I think that's a great way that we can start in January to look at that. And with Kate's input of focusing on the stone and rock homes as well, I think those unique attributes that we have in the community that are gems to us, yeah, are certainly a focus. You'd mentioned, Antonetta, that you were doing a inventory of homes that were 100 years old or older. And I think you said you're going to come back with that as well to help us with looking at whether age was going to be a factor. And when I was looking on the website, I also noticed that there had been a previous report done by Heritage, and Bianca might remember this or one of the other staff. In 2018, there was an inventory done of properties in the downtown that were 1950s or older. So there should be existing as well an inventory of downtown properties and their ages. So it might be something to combine and bring back when you bring your report on the homes that are 100 years or older in town. The other thing I just wanted to ask Bianca about this status report is I don't see anything about our upcoming budget discussions. And I know that council is going to be engaging in budget, I think actually in the next meeting or two, and I haven't seen anything as to what's proposed for our budget. And that is as well part of our terms of reference that we should be reviewing that. So do you know when that's coming forward?
Maybe I'll take the question, Councillor Dunstall, if you're okay. Just,
Yeah, you go.
there were a couple there. So I think, to be clear, we do have a student working on some properties that are sorry, someone has to mute. Yeah. Creating an inventory for us to help look at or help shape the committee's ideas, but we need to layer that whatever properties there might be with all of these other considerations for rarity, considerations for what areas maybe might be subject to development or adjacent to development. Those are all things we need to layer. And also I want to be clear that a home does not need to be 100 years old to be designated. It can be, I've designated a property as young or as old as 16 years old, but it was very rare. It was very rare in Canada in terms of its architectural style. So age is not a requirement for either the inventory or designation. So I would never want to limit us to 1950 and over or 100 years and over. So just so that the committee knows that. So I hope that answered the first part of the question. And I think, you know, if the committee found it agreeable, what we could do is have a learning session and maybe help teach, if that's something that you guys are willing to learn, how to use criteria 906 against the properties. And maybe you already know a good chunk of it from reading the reports, but when you're listing it, and we can again show you the templates in terms of other municipalities to show you that it can actually be a fairly concise and short report with not an awful lot needed. And the other thing that some municipalities have done that I wanted to talk to you about it in January was consider listing multiple properties at once without having an individual report for each, especially if they fall into a grouping or a concentration of properties. There's also precedence for that. So there's a whole series of things that we wanted to discuss as part of the work plan. And then Councillor Bothwell, your second question, I haven't had any history on how budget works here with committees, but I would be happy to invite our treasurer or someone from his team to discuss budget with you if that is indeed a part of your terms of reference. And we can have that discussion. Maybe we can talk about a date, whether it's during budget deliberations at council or what would be the most appropriate date. But I think it's wise for us to have them in the room as well when we have those conversations.
Previously, and I know you're new, planning staff have prepared the budget and gone to the treasurer and presented it to the treasurer and the CAO. So I just wondered what stage we're at there with planning, having perhaps created a draft budget, and that we had asked in the past year to see what that draft budget was from planning staff. And Mr. Basic, the acting director, I think at the time, gave us a verbal update. So I think we just had asked at that time that we'd be more involved because we do want to ensure that we're capturing everything that we need to when it does go forward to council. And that is part of our role, is to have input into that. So I don't think it's so much asking the treasurer what's going on, it's asking planning staff what they're proposing to put into it.
If I might ask the CAO, he's like to weigh in on this conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, the budget
Mr.
for
Slang.
2020 was done at a corporate level, Chair. We're working on that. First draft's probably early mid-January. So we're working on it at a corporate level because, as we know, this year will not be much of an increase that we're looking at. So we're doing it as a team, not just as planning staff. We're looking at it holistically across the entire corporation. So again, maybe in mid-January, you could provide input to it, but we're doing this at a corporate level.
So I appreciate that. It's just not having any sense of what's going on is extremely, to me, difficult to manage when we look at the costs. Like Bianca's mentioning that we're going to put aside the money for the plaques and the installation of the other ones. And we had talked about, what does that happen if we don't expend it in this year? Does it go into reserves? You know, what are we looking at our carry forward budget? So I think we need to have those discussions at the committee level before we're just surprised with what's going to be presented to council. So if it is January, then yeah, we're having a meeting first thing in January. I think it'd be great if we could have some feedback as to what's how we're handling those ongoing items that we currently have waiting to be costed out, and what's anticipated with respect to the current budget, and how we're planning to do our future work plan.
Again, you know, January 19th probably is the earliest. We're going to consolidate things as a corporation and see where we're landing. And so, you know, maybe a week or two after that, you know, Antonetta can start to share some of that info with you. But it's council that we're really working with on the budget holistically.
So you don't see us providing input, Antonetta, then in the beginning of January at the meeting prior to it going forward?
Antonetta.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair, admittedly, this hasn't been my past practice with committees or advisory committees. So I do want to do some due diligence into that, but oh, sorry. Harry needs to speak.
Yeah, we're going to huddle Antonetta probably January 19th as a corporation, and then we can give you some advice to deal with the committee on budgeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Kate, go ahead. Yes.
Just one more question through you, Councillor Dunstall. I see that you mentioned on the schedule, the planning staff advising about the heritage component of the Grimsby Beach study. I was just curious where the survey is at and if that's going to be released soon. Bianca?
Through you, the chair. So we have received the survey from HBC, and we actually we're just sending in our edits today, and we're hoping to have that back soon. And then we'll be sending it to the technical advisory committee and the stakeholders advisory committee, and then the actual survey will be posted along with the storyboard will be launched at the same time. So.
Thanks. A stakeholder had asked and I said that I would ask.
Yeah.
So seeing no further questions, if we could receive this, the status and activity sheet report. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bothwell. A seconder? Kate, did you put your hand? Yes, you did. Good. I'll read that. It's moved by Councillor Bothwell, second by Kate. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee receive the status and activity sheet for information. All in favor? That's carried. So we're moving to number 6, reports, and we have a memo that was in our agenda for the 2021 Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meetings schedule. I'm sure everybody's had a chance to look at it. I expect comments. Any comments on the schedule for 2021? Well, seeing none, I have a resolution here. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee approve the 2021 meeting schedule. I need a mover. That's Kate. And a seconder. Olia. All in favor? And that's carried. So we'll move then to item number C, draft designation research report 104 Main Street East. I think Bianca, you want to say anything, or are we just going to go ahead and vote on this? We've pretty well covered everything, have we? Are there any questions on 104? Kate?
Through you, Councillor Dunstall, not a question. I just wanted to really quickly tell you that it mentions that the employee discovered in 1876 the bones, and I think it's 17 or 19. It wasn't. What is in the 1970s? Unless we had lots of employees during the 1800s. I just spotted it.
It's a typo, eh? Okay. So do we want to vote on that? Yep. What did you go ahead, Antonetta, go ahead.
Yeah, perhaps through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarity for the committee, if we vote to proceed with the designation reports tonight, it initiates the process. It doesn't mean they get designated immediately. We have steps and requirements that we have to follow under the Ontario Heritage Act. So should any sort of minor, changes come up, we still have a window to make them. But I think given the changes that we're concerned about with Bill 108, our advice would be we have enough for each of these reports, in our opinion, to meet criteria 906 and to successfully defend those reports. And while we still are always happy for feedback, we really think that, we've had enough sort of times around with this report. It's really important that we move forward to protect these properties on Main Street. And all it does is, should council then approve the recommendation to proceed with the designations, we would then initiate the process. So, you have to create a notice of intention. It has to be posted, 30 days for objections, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't mean you get designated immediately. So there's still opportunities for little tweaks and refinements, but our strong recommendation is, these have come around many times, and we'd rather move forward and protect the properties than, just continually make more refinements and delay the process, because it will take quite some time. We also said that, there can be objections to these designation reports by the homeowner, so we have to deal with that. In fact, I think we did receive a letter from a property owner of concern from a property owner. We've responded to them, but there's still a whole host of things that we need to work through.
So that being said, can we agree that we're going to vote in favor of designating these homes that are listed on here from C to, sorry, F? I thought it was, what about G? Not G? Oh, it's different? Sorry. Okay, so we're going to the two on the Colts properties, the end. So we'll go to F. Everybody's okay with that? We'll do them one at a time, but nobody has any questions. Good. Yeah, C to F. So I'm going to start with.
It's all together.
Oh, it's all good. It's just one resolution. Thank you. Wow. That's so. Could we get a mover on that one then? And I'll read it out. I thought it was Antonetta was your hand one. Okay. I need a mover. Is that your hand moving, Kate? Okay, thank you. And a seconder?
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bothwell. So let me read the resolution. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend that the following properties: 104 Main Street East, 130 Main Street East, the Danish Lutheran Church, 141 Main Street East, the Christmas Cottage, 147 Main Street East be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Act. All in favor? Great, thank you. That is carried. So then we'll move on to 224 Main Street East, the Adele House. The Adele House. And that's a separate one. Are there any comments, concerns? Seeing none. Can we get a mover on that one? Yeah, Olia. And a seconder. Thank you, Councilor Bothwell. And resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend that the draft designation report, 224 Main Street East, the Adele Street, be received, and that the property designation bylaw be amended to add significant attributes. All in favor?
Can you just read that again? Because I thought I heard Udell Street.
Yeah, it's what it says, Adele Street.
It's not Udell Street, it's the Udell House on Main Street East.
Good point. I'll read it again. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend that the draft designation report, 224 Main Street East, the Udell House, be received, and that the property designation bylaw be amended to add significant attributes. All in favor? Thank you. It's carried. Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. It's the report on the draft report. I Draft report of Main Street East Proposed Heritage Conservation District Bylaw and Study. And Antoinette, do you want to talk about that before we have any questions or comments?
Sure.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Sarah, would you like me to announce that?
Yes.
Yeah, so just for the committee's information, we do have the town's legal counsel on the call with us. He has just been let into the Zoom meeting, so he is available. His name is Mr. Tom Helinski for any questions that you may have, as well as we're here for that all as well. So what we thought we'd do is just a quick presentation, very informal. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask us, but it's meant to accompany the staff report that was provided, the draft staff report that was provided to you. So I'm just gonna ask Bianca to go to the next slide, if I may. So again, Mr. Mayor, councillors, committee members, members of the public, thank you on behalf of staff for the opportunity to present some thoughts on how best to proceed with the protection of Main Street and some of the surrounding areas. Again, this is a draft presentation, just like the report that was prepared for Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee, and feedback from the committee will form a part of our final presentation and report that is targeting council for December 21st. Next slide, please. So it's much more detailed in the report, but what we thought we'd go over is just some quick decision history. In 2015, a cultural heritage landscape report was prepared by staff, and it was not adopted in our official plan, but the report was sort of approved and endorsed by council. And it does include portions of Main Street as a cultural heritage landscape. However, the eastern portion is a scenic route only. And also it includes every single parcel that is on Main Street. So it wasn't that any parcels were excluded from that. Then and I just want to make sure I get my dates right, but please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. On March 19, 2018, there was a consultant selected to initiate a secondary plan for the hospital and surrounding area, which would include much of this portion of Main Street East. And in January 29, 2019, staff report, they put forward a report that talked about the importance of a secondary plan and urban design guidelines, and also the preparation of a potential interim control bylaw. That secondary plan was later canceled. And it should also be noted that the secondary plan identified that heritage protection was a key goal as part of that secondary plan. Then, as part of the budget deliberations last year, a motion was approved that said either a cultural heritage landscape and or a heritage conservation district be created or be brought forward. Staff were preparing a report in the fall to seek clarification on which was intended by council, a cultural heritage landscape and or heritage conservation district. In the meantime, staff were also actively pursuing Part 4 designation under the Ontario Heritage Act of key properties as an interim protection measure because we were concerned about the properties on Main Street East in particular. Before the staff report could come forward, a notice of motion was put together that had a proposed study and bylaw affiliated with it. And that's what triggered us to be here talking about this in particular. So next slide, please. The proposed study bylaw, the proposed boundary in the study bylaw excludes properties that front onto Main Street East. Unfortunately, we don't have any rationale for why those properties were chosen to be excluded. I think with the exception of the hospital, there was probably some intent around not slowing that down. But there were some other properties, like I said, that were included in the cultural heritage landscape, but excluded in this proposed study bylaw. As we said, council endorsed the cultural heritage landscapes in 2015. The concentration of heritage buildings in the proposed study bylaw area diminishes significantly as you go towards the eastern boundary towards our town line. And there are some maps in the report that show that, and I believe even measure some of the distance. And while we acknowledge that public consultation is not required under the Ontario Heritage Act at this stage, We do believe that we need more robust and transparent public consultation. Otherwise, it can leave the public a little bit confused with what's going on. There are also some existing development applications in the queue that we believe sort of need to be addressed by the study bylaw. Some of them have submitted their own heritage impact assessments and saying that there are no heritage impacts. Those have been done by qualified heritage professionals, and so we need to consider those. Also, currently, as it's written, it doesn't allow for any changes. We had our chief building official and legal review the language, and they were of the opinion that it doesn't allow for any changes, even maintenance to your properties on the exterior. Also, as I said earlier, it can create a lot of community confusion. And one of the key things about the success of heritage conservation districts is community support. In fact, the ones that are the most successful and that take the least amount of time to implement is when the community is a strong champion. And community in particular, in this case, can mean the people who actually live in or own properties in the proposed boundary. If the study area is too large, our efforts kind of diminish, and focused efforts towards more sensitive areas can be diluted. So perhaps we need to reconsider the boundaries and really focus our attention to key areas. And also the study bylaw as written, the size of it, in our opinion, sort of the need for a bit more rationale on the boundary really opens up the town to potential appeals, which is concerning for us as staff. So we wanted to talk a little bit about heritage conservation districts. They are a useful tool and they can work well. They do require, as I said, very strong community support. They're most successful when that happens. Focused areas work best. And I understand that, when the bylaw is put forward, the study can always narrow down the scope of that boundary, but for now, we're working with what was put out there. And so it's really key to focus sort of the area of any future potential heritage conservation district based not only on our professional experience, but also on some benchmarking that we've undertaken for heritage conservation districts. On average, they're taking 5+ years to establish a district. Some can be sooner. They have a lot of support. Ones in talking to our colleagues that didn't have that support are on their 10th year and they still don't have a district in place. And in order to achieve that consensus, what often happens is HCDs, policies, and guidelines are challenged. And so they're reworked, and then often they get watered down, and you lose really what some of the intent of the Heritage Conservation District was. So we're just warning to sort of some potential pitfalls. Heritage districts can be appealed, and also districts require a significant staff administration and can be perceived as onerous on property owners. So while we don't charge for heritage permits, changes will require heritage permits, heritage impact assessments, things of that nature. And I think the bigger the boundary gets, the more concerns we have that when you have areas, that don't have any heritage resources whatsoever, we need to really be careful on how we deal with those. Also, and this is in our field quite a lot, there's a lot of conversations, is that heritage conservation is generally under threat. We brought forward a copy of our report last time from the threats to Bill 108. Most recently, we attended a workshop held by the National Trust and some insurance companies in order to deal with COVID and rising costs are actually saying that they want to refuse to designate heritage properties. Now, of course, it's not just because of the designation, it's because of knob and tube and all the reasons that can be affiliated with older houses, whether they're designated or not. But one heritage professional said this is one of the greatest threats sort of in the conservation field. Beyond that, insurance for heritage properties. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry if I'm mistaken. Insurance is a concern for heritage properties. So they're withholding insurance. Also, and interestingly, in the new provincial policy statements, the definition for cultural heritage landscapes identifies planning tools as a mechanism for preservation and protection and not tools under the Ontario Heritage Act. And so our interpretation is that that means official plan, secondary plan policies rather than Part 4 or Part 5 designation. On that note, many heritage professional feels that the guidance documents from the province haven't been released, and yet we don't know how to navigate this new space of heritage. So much is up in the air with heritage that we're a little concerned, and that's why we want, and you could see through the staff presentation, we're recommending a series of tools instead of one tool, especially a tool that is right now under a little bit of flux, and some concerns are emerging from that. So what else should we or could we as a town and as a community consider? So in addition to or in place of a potential heritage conservation district, we could consider other tools. As we've been doing Part 4 designations and their adjacency policies can be effective, particularly as an interim measure. Next. We could adopt urban design guidelines. The region has existing ones, and they're meant for communities at the municipal level to adopt them. And they also have ones pertaining to Main Street and historic character areas that we can adopt again as an interim measure. Next. Development permit system is something that hasn't been talked about here at the town, but it is a tool. They've been using it for a while in Ontario. Not a lot of municipalities have done it, but it does also create a lot of provisions for heritage protection and a lot of clarity about what can and cannot happen. So that's another tool that we describe in the report. A focused secondary plan. Perhaps we could resurrect the partially completed secondary plan. $58,000, I understand, was already spent on that plan. The studies are about 2 years old. So it's our hope that much of that information can be used and can be updated without significant cost to the municipality. Also, we can focus our efforts with a higher concentration of heritage resources. So do we need to change the boundaries? Do we need to move west a little bit and capture the higher concentration of heritage buildings? We also provided some mapping with our designated and listed buildings for the committee's consideration to say where would an effective heritage conservation district be. Next. And I think the main message we're trying to get across is let's not only rely on one tool when there's multiple tools that could make sense for different areas within the study area and beyond. And we talk about that a little bit more as we go through the presentation. Community engagement. As I said, staff acknowledge community engagement is not required at this stage, but in all of our work, it's been really a key component to the success of the project. And so what does the community really want? Are we confident that we have all voices present at the table? And, you know, based on some of the letters we've received, the many, many phone calls that staff have had to take and sort of, you know, calm people down and talk to them a little bit, we're not sure that all the voices are represented in what's being proposed right now. And that's going to be really critical, especially as, like I said, if we do choose to pursue a heritage conservation district, that owner consensus is really critical to the success. We also need to understand the area more comprehensively. Heritage is a key focus, but there are other concerns, parking, the environment, and many other things that we need to consider, the spin-off effects of the hospital and the pressure that that will put on the area. So we really want to look at things with a comprehensive lens, but also make sure our citizens are engaged, informed, and feel part of the process. Next. So here's our opportunity. Let's get it right. Let's apply the best tools possible to achieve the best outcomes for our community. Don't rely just on one tool. We can actually layer tools. Tools aren't mutually exclusive. If we use one tool, that doesn't mean we can't use another tool. And maybe one tool makes sense for a certain area, but other tools make sense for the larger area. So different tools potentially for different sections of Main Street. Also, we understand that all of these things, and Kate, you alluded to this, can take so much time. And what we think we need to come up with is a targeted interim approach for those most vulnerable areas. So a targeted interim approach for the vulnerable areas, which can include Part 4 designation, but we have a whole host of other ideas of what else that it can include. But at the same time, let's either start or reinitiate a more comprehensive strategy to address the balance of the area, which still requires our attention. Again, involve the community early, often, and perhaps most importantly, meaningfully. And look at the Grimsby Beach model. I'm not sure, you know, which council members are on right now, but the two council members who have seen what is unfolding in the Grimsby Beach area, you can really see that it starts with community engagement. The feedback has been wonderful. We haven't predetermined a tool yet. We'll be presenting all of the tools to the community, and together we're going to pick what works. And so we like to look at that as a model for working very collaboratively with both council and the community in choosing something that really works for a specific area. So there's also there's benefits to using Ontario Heritage Act instruments, but there's also benefits of Planning Act instruments. They do tend to be more comprehensive in nature. They do hold more weight at LPAT hearings. In fact, the OP is heavily relied upon, and they tend to be more overarching in nature. All policies and bylaws are enabled through Planning Act instruments. And so we just don't want to ignore instruments that we have under the Planning Act that we could utilize to help protect this area. So build a strong, vibrant community. Heritage is a magnet for investment. Heritage and economic development work together. We've done so much work and research on the economic benefits of heritage preservation that is well understood in our field. I was part of a study for Heritage District Works by Professor Robert Shipley. So we know all the things about how wonderful heritage is. And sympathetic development, though, we have to acknowledge can help us conserve our buildings for the long term. If through our actions, intended or unintended, we create some disinvestment or stagnation, it can lead to people not taking care of their heritage buildings, demolition by neglect, and potentially irreversible damage to heritage buildings. The best chance at long-term survival and viability of heritage resources for the long term is really finding a balance between development and heritage preservation. And as you all know, and I don't need to repeat it, but heritage isn't intended to stop change. Districts are intended to guide how change happens by the way of demanding the best of new development. So let's figure out what we want to get done and where and which areas of Main Street, and then get that done. But let's do it together, and let's do it in a really comprehensive and collaborative way. So in summary, heritage is a very important part of our community. The proposed Heritage District Study Bylaw would benefit from further consultation and a bit more study and review. HCDs can be a good option when done well and on a strong foundation of community support within the proposed boundary. HCDs, though, can also take a long time, are subject to appeal, require significant staff administration, and any boundaries must have a strong rationale. Main Street East requires additional protection and policies above and beyond heritage. Urban design, which yes, some may be covered by the Heritage Conservation District, but public realm considerations, transportation, parking, environmental aspirations, etc. There are many tools available to us. So why limit ourselves to one tool? Why not utilize other and additional tools? The community, as I said, must be properly and meaningfully engaged. And let's give our heritage the best possible protection and greatest chance of long-term success. So more tools, not less. Finally, as I mentioned, we have our legal counsel on the line, and the town has received legal advice that an approach using multiple tools available to the municipality under the Ontario Heritage Act and the Planning Act, combined with a thorough public consultation process, is likely to produce the most defensible regime in the event of an appeal. And I think there's one more slide, this is an excerpt out of our report. These are our staff recommendations, and it is a draft. We are here to receive feedback, but we've proposed two options at this point. So the typical that the report regarding the proposed study bylaw for proposed Heritage Conservation District for Main Street East be received, that the proposed study bylaw for a Heritage Conservation District in the Main Street East area not proceed at this time, that staff be directed instead to prepare an RFP for the retention of a consulting firm to evaluate the best possible options for the comprehensive planning of Main Street East. The RFP will call for comprehensive community engagement, evaluation of tools under both the Planning Act and Ontario Heritage Act, and the creation of an action plan to move the project forward. Upon the substantial completion of the initial study, staff can immediately prepare an additional RFP to execute the action plan endorsed by council. And that in order to deliver the project in an expedited manner, staff be directed to retain a project manager for this file. Alternatively, keeping recommendations 1 and 2, adding that it could be that staff be directed to conduct the community engagement to better understand what the vision for the Main Street East area, and that staff report on the findings of the community engagement to council at the end of Q1 and put forward a series of peer-reviewed options for a path forward, an action plan, and that staff prepare an RFP for the retention of a planning consultant to execute the action plan. that in order to deliver the project in an expedited manner, staff be directed to retain a project manager for the file. Again, these are draft, but there are initial thoughts on how we think the best way or some of the best ways to proceed can be. Yeah. I think that concludes my presentation for the purposes of this evening. Very happy to take questions and receive feedback.
Thank you, Antoinette. Very comprehensive. Questions from the committee? Kate, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, John. Through you, Councillor Dunstall. I have a question. With your design guidelines, is it possible to establish design guidelines for an entire town without it being a huge historical district, that guidelines that have teeth? The only reason I ask that is I think about our town being 230 plus years. And I think about, if we look at ourselves, like if we look at from a marketing standpoint, or even from a persona standpoint, and you look at a person who say is, he has a certain identity. They wear black clothes, they are conservative looking, and then one day they show up and they're wearing, like, they bleached their hair and like, it's like crazy, like they're wearing fluorescent clothes. Like certain aspects of recent builds, like when I think of my identity of my town, the one that I surround myself with, I don't necessarily think of some of these modern new builds that we've had. I'm not saying they're wrong or anything like that, but I'm just wondering, is there a possibility of establishing, moving forward, design guidelines for, and figuring out what is our identity, who we are, and move forward like other towns have done, other historic towns have done. Like even Port Dover, about 15 years ago, Tim Hortons wanted to come into their town. They didn't have a Tim Hortons in the town. And they said, would you paint it? Would you design your Tim Hortons? Like everyone knows how strong the Tim Hortons brand is. Would you build a building that is baby blue and looks nautical? And they did. And so there's a nautical looking Tim Hortons in downtown because they followed the design guidelines of a seaside town, right? And I'm just wondering, is there even a possibility to establish these kinds of design guidelines for our town, parts of our town that might not be, like maybe, like this whole stretch, maybe it's not it included, maybe we streamline it, but could we, in the new builds moving forward, have design guidelines so they feel like they fit into the corridor, even though it's a little bit beyond the corridor we were trying to protect?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take that question. There's a series of things we can do. You can certainly adopt town-wide guidelines that say you should respect sort of the character that you're in, but guidelines are usually tailored to an area. Town-wide guidelines, though, can apply to drive-throughs and things of that nature to ensure, let's say, the drive-through isn't on the street side or things like that. But we would really recommend more area-specific design guidelines. And to your point about Tim Hortons, in a historic area in the previous community I worked in, Tim Hortons had to not follow their corporate standard. They built it entirely out of brick. It had very much a heritage feel to it. It had awnings. And we even, through strong urban design guidelines, had Shoppers Drug Mart deviate from their typical standard and give us something a bit more heritage. Bolton has been successful in doing this, and some communities have been very successful in getting sort of your big box retailers or your, Tim Hortons is Starbucks of the world, although Starbucks is a bit more flexible, to conform to town-specific design guidelines, in particular certain areas. So certainly an outcome could be that we have urban design guidelines that perhaps don't force it to look like heritage, but respect the symmetry, the window openings, the materiality of the heritage buildings, because you always want to be able to distinguish between old and new. But yes, of course, we can create design guidelines, some perhaps general for the whole town, but some very specific to certain areas.
See no further questions. Do I have a resolution to receive this? Oh, Olia. Oh, there it is. Good. Go ahead, Olia.
So I've just prepared something written just to kind of collect my thoughts as I read the report. I have several concerns with the staff report that Council's November 2nd motion to revert this committee's October 6th recommendation on the commencement of the Main Street East HCD study. In my reading of the report, I noted that there was a significant amount of airtime devoted to other alternatives rather than assessing the HCD study proposed in the original motion, which Council sent back for further consideration. The assessment was limited to questioning the study boundaries and the community consultation that went into proposing them. This staff report identifies only one of the 6 Council endorsed CHLs that encompass this area, which in my view do well to inform the proposed study area boundary. The commencement of a study spanning these CHLs is not the appropriate time to limit the boundary. Rather, it is the outcome of such a study that should inform the boundary of an ultimate HCD. To do so at this early stage would be premature. The report indicates that community engagement is needed to better understand what the vision for Main Street East area is. I submit to Council that it has already heard time and again from the community expressing its concerns with this area. I trust that councillors campaigned on prioritizing heritage because that is what the community expressed was of concern. Councillors have frequently expressed during their meetings that emails that they have received expressing about concerns and changes on the Main Street East area, and extensive community outreach in the form of an online survey informed the very composition of Council's strategic priorities. Make no mistake that there have been, I'm sorry, I lost my place. Make no mistake that we are at this juncture today because of extensive community engagement. A critical element of an HCD plan, should an HCD study propose one, is to provide a forum for continuing this dialogue and engaging the community to give it the opportunity to shape the future development and revitalization of Main Street East. Staff agree with the community and council that this area is in need of attention, yet there seems to be a clear disagreement about the best way forward. The report indicates it is critical that heritage preservation not be seen in isolation from other considerations, and attempts to resurrect the secondary plan study, which this council has already defeated in a decisive vote. The report does not highlight to council that a best practice of an HCD plan, if pursued after the completion of an HCD study, would encompass a broad range of urban planning and design matters, some of which include traffic, parking, signage, pedestrian realm, and other streetscape elements. This is exactly what the toolkit recommends in an HCD plan. You need to look no further than the downtown Oakville HCD to see that this type of framework is already a comprehensive tool. While an HCD is a comprehensive tool, I would also caution council that the report conflates many other urban planning and design considerations for Main Street East at the expense of a clear heritage-focused approach, which the HCD, if approved by council, would provide. In doing so, some rather expensive options are being proposed. Having witnessed the most recent budget approval process and the amount of community outcry at the increases that we were ultimately required to bear, I have concerns that these expensive recommendations, which cover much more than heritage conservation, will be misconstrued as justification not to support an HCD study. Instead of an HCD, this report recommends the pursuit of individual designations and indicates that heritage reasons are sparsely situated along Main Street East. A recommendation to designate properties on a piecemeal basis does nothing to protect or enhance the CHLs themselves and is by definition an isolated tool. The fact that more heritage resources have not been formally identified by the way of the municipal register or the list of designated properties that were reflected in appendices 4 and 5 of this report does not mean that they don't exist. I would caution council that this inventory is a work in progress and is incomplete. Please consider that in the last 10 years, this town has designated only 14 properties in the whole of the town. Surely we can all agree that a pace of 1.5 or so properties a year is inadequate in the face of the pressure on this area. An HCD, if recommended as an outcome of this proposed study, would be a much more efficient and cost-conscious tool to achieve Council's goals of responsible development, as well as protection, preservation, and enhancement of heritage and culture, as identified in its strategic priorities, which themselves were born out of extensive and transparent community engagement. I would like to request that a copy of my statement, which I will provide to the clerk, be included as an appendix to Council as part of the final staff report. And I'd also like to thank those community members who are watching tonight and for their continued resolve, and so that you please reach out to all of your councillors to continue to voice your concerns.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. I also have written a statement because I sometimes find it's hard to remember what I want to say. And I would appreciate your indulgence. I hope I don't go too long, but some of the reference might take a bit of time. To echo Olia's statement there about, we appreciate the staff's effort, but I have some concerns as well with this report. Council at the November 2nd meeting referred the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Council endorsement package and the draft bylaw back to Heritage Committee in Resolution C-2396, which is resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee Council endorsement package dated October 19, 2020 be referred back to the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee in consultation with legal staff, and that it be brought back to Council at the December 21st, 2020 meeting. What was referred back to committee in this resolution is the draft bylaw for an HCD study for refinement and clarification. The draft bylaw and recommendations from this committee is expected to be brought back to the council at the December 21st meeting. So it's our recommendations, not staff's. And I have a few comments with respect to the report. Well, first of all, to clarify, the draft bylaw that was prepared previously, hearing the concerns at council and understanding where they were coming from with respect to the ongoing development on Main Street, the developers that are currently having projects in place, and the concerns from neighbors that they didn't understand what an interim control bylaw meant. I'm saying that I would suggest that when we get to the end of my statement here, that we totally remove the language with respect to the interim control bylaw section, and we focus on what's most important here, which is commencing the study. So I think we can resolve a lot of the concerns that were raised by homeowners as to what can I do and not do with my home if we put this interim control bylaw in place and remove that section of it and focus on what committee wants, which is commencing the study. With respect to the paragraph, an area in need of attention, it's interesting that the original version of this report, which was posted publicly, included the full quote from the January 2019 planning report, which included this sentence: "The parcels in this area are relatively large and would likely be rather inexpensive to redevelop since building footprints are generally small." This sentence has been removed from the current version that's posted online, and I'm unclear why, as this further illustrates and supports the critical importance of identifying and protecting the valuable heritage resources and associated CHLs in this area through an HCD study and implementation of an HCD plan. With respect to the paragraphs on the PPS, what's not included in the report is one of the most important statements of the PPS that has consistently been included even up to the current version. And that's part 4, the vision for the Ontario's land use planning system. The province's natural heritage resources, water resources, including the Great Lakes, agricultural resources, mineral resources, and natural heritage, and cultural heritage and archaeological resources provide important environmental, economic, and social benefits. The wise use and management of these resources over the long term is a key provincial interest. This is the only place in the provincial policy statement where a key provincial interest is identified. Also, long-term economic prosperity should be supported by encouraging a sense of place by promoting well-designed built form and cultural planning, and by conserving features that help define character, including built heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes. Cultural heritage, 2.6, cultural heritage and archaeology. 2.61, significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. 2.64, planning authorities should consider and promote archaeological management plans and cultural plans in conserving cultural heritage and archaeological resources. So that language is still in there. Also, the widely referenced and highly regarded 2009 report, the Heritage District's work, states, many people now consider the Heritage Conservation District to be one of the most effective tools, not only for historic conservation, but for good urban design and sound planning. And Heritage Conservation District designation is not intended to prevent development and enables the council to manage and guide future change. This kind of guidance over 1/10 of 1% of the province in the promotion of a key provincial interest is not an onerous burden on the land use planning process. The province does not intend that a Heritage Conservation District plan will present each detailed aspect within a district as if it were a museum, but it does intend that a district plan will control change so that it contributes to and does not detract from the district's special character. The law intends that Heritage Conservation District plans will conserve that character forever or until council de-designates the district where it comes first. The province does not intend that conservation comes with a sunset clause to be invoked when a developer sees the potential for profit. No other tool proposed will provide that stability for future generations. The regional official plan, and I'm not sure why in this report, the report includes references to sections 4A13 and 4C21, C and I, as all of these references are specifically related to policy direction for municipally designated intensification areas. Main Street East is not a municipally designated intensification area, like our downtown and the Winston Road neighborhood. So these references are not even relevant or applicable. The regional OP official plan does make reference to the importance of cultural heritage in another section, which wasn't included in this report, and it is very relevant. Under 10.C, creative places, 10C2.1, built heritage resources, cultural heritage landscapes, and archaeological resources. Significant built heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved using the provisions of the Heritage Act, the Planning Act, the Environmental Assessment Act, the Funeral, Burial, and Cremations Act, and the Municipal Act. And then policy 10C2.1.2, the region shares an interest in the protection and conservation of significant built heritage resources and encourages local municipalities to develop policies to protect and conserve locally significant built heritage resources and to utilize its authority under the Ontario Heritage Act to designate individual properties, cultural heritage landscapes, and heritage conservation districts that are of cultural heritage value or interest. The tool also suggested in the report, which is the development permit system, and which is interesting because the government introduced development permit systems in 2007 to change the way municipalities do planning. This report doesn't note that the development permit system was revoked and replaced with the community planning permit system in 2016. So that they're very similar, but there is a few things that are different and of serious concern at this time. The community planning permit systems, which is the replacement for the DPS, rolls the any zoning bylaw amendment, minor variances, and site plan approval all into one permitting system. The intent was to speed up the development process, which it does, of course. What it did take away, though, was the rights of the public to be informed and to provide input on specific developments in their neighborhood once the DPS bylaw was in place. Most often, all planning decisions and permit approvals are delegated to planning staff, so very little would even come forward to council for review or approval. No further public engagement would be required for new developments or redevelopments in your neighborhood. It would just happen. Understandably, development permit systems, or CPPSs, have not been widely embraced. Only 3 small municipalities have adopted them, and the city of Brampton, which Antonetta, I'm sure, is very familiar with. There's Lake of Bays, Carlton Place, and Gananoque, and they've used these DPSs mainly for their shoreline development management with respect to cottages and boathouses, or in place of a comprehensive zoning bylaw. Bill 108 now presents the additional threat, and it gives the minister the power to mandate CPPSs to draw lines on a map indicating where ones would have to be establishing a CPS. So Bill 108 is a threat that uses the tool, the CPS tool, similar to the ministerial zoning orders that are now happening. So there's a real risk with what Bill 108 is bringing forward with respect to CPPSs, and I'm not comfortable with that. It's also noticeable that only 4 municipalities have enacted them out of 444 municipalities since 2007, while 134 heritage conservation districts have been put in place and continue to grow. Many municipalities have multiple heritage conservation districts due to their success. The same cannot be said for the DPS or CPPSs. Do we need to have a heritage master plan in place before we commence a study? No, because often a master plan evolves from a number of initiatives, and an HCD study can feed into a master plan in tandem. It's just not an option now to delay moving forward on this study. What will it cost? It wasn't provided in the report other than an estimate that it's going to be more than 100, and then we need another 100 and so to provide for another consultant and another project manager. That 100,000 should do it because we've got the research from another number of other municipalities when councils received that information in an earlier email from a resident. And Beaton, which I looked up, did their HCD plan, their study for 50K, their plan for another 51. Whitby recently did their complete study and plan for 150. Bradford did theirs, a study for 40 and their plan for 55. So, okay. So the monies there are reasonable for us to commence this study. Whitby also provides an excellent example as well of a terms of reference for the scope of the study that includes significant public engagement. And it's a helpful model to use for our proposed study terms of reference for an RFP for a consultant. It's also interesting that many municipalities use capital funds or reserves to pay for these studies. And that's why I'm not too sure how that's working, but it would be interesting. They've also applied and been successful in getting grants for these studies. So I would hope that staff will explore these avenues as well for potential recovery of costs. When it comes to comparing the proposed tools in the arsenal that are in this report, it's evident that the strongest and most effective tool is an HCD. Some may say that this is weaponizing heritage. When our heritage is at risk under Bill 108 and with constant changes to the Planning Act and other legislation, it's critical that we do, excuse me, use the means necessary to do what this community has asked us to do. Protect the small town feel, heritage, and character of our town. I'm not comfortable with either of the recommendations being put forward in the report. I'd like to put forward an amendment to the draft bylaw that has come back to the committee to remove the interim control section and recommend to council to proceed with the process to commence an HCD study. I have draft wording that I can provide the clerk, which takes the existing bylaw and resolution and removes those sections, and also includes a map that includes the entire Main Street East area with no exceptions for the study purposes only. And as we remove the interim control, there is no impact to the current developments or homeowners at all with respect to including the full Main Street East section. So I'd like to propose that after all discussion is done here, that if there's a motion that's going to be brought forward, I'd like to prepare one to amend the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Block. If I might ask you a question, you have things well prepared there. You've written it all down. Could you go back to the beginning and explain the first part of your comment about how this resolution came back to the Heritage Committee? I just want to make sure we're clear.
Sure. So actually what I did was I went back to the motion in the council minutes, and it says that council at the November 2nd meeting referred the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee, the council endorsement package, and the draft bylaw back to Heritage Committee. The resolution was C-2396, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Frake, resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee council endorsement package, dated October 19, 2020, be referred back to the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee in consultation with legal and staff, and that it be brought back to the council at the December 21st, 2020 meeting.
Good. Okay. Yeah, that's clear.
So it's bylaw.
It's in consultation with staff and legal. Okay.
but it's the bylaw that was supposed to be brought back to us. And that's in this report, and that's why I'm asking to amend the bylaw to be returned to council.
Can we get legal to weigh in on this too, please? Tom, you're here, you're listening away.
I am. Good evening.
Yes, I'd sure like to hear what you have to say.
I'd be happy to comment, and then I'll try to cover the excuse me, the points that I have comments on in the open session. Obviously, if there are any further follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know that the two statements will be provided to the clerk, which I think is going to be very helpful, certainly to me and to staff in fine-tuning the report. As Antonetta was indicated at the outset, it is a draft report. It was certainly intended to reflect the resolution, but we've received, I think, a lot of useful feedback. I also think that having an amendment or a revision to the proposed bylaw, assuming that committee votes to adopt that, will allow us to fine-tune the analysis. It does change fairly substantially portions of the bylaw and therefore the effect. I would add a few comments just at a high level, if I might, in terms of the community permitting system, or the DPS. And the councillor is, of course, right that there were substantial revisions made to it, and it has not been widely adopted. It's a tool that's only now finding its legs. I think that, to be fair, there is some concern about the province making revisions to that tool as well as other tools on the fly. But as well as the councillor has pointed out, there are also concerns about the province doing top-down planning in the way of MZOs. There's a slew of MZOs that have been requested and have come through. In fact, I think over the past few months there were more than in the last 20 years combined. So the concerns there, no matter what the system is, but certainly the input is valid, and I think it's giving us a lot to think about. From my perspective, the fundamental part of the recommendations is really point number 3, which is that the process move forward, but that it be broadened to also contemplate other tools that are available to the town in order to accomplish the goal that the committee is striving to accomplish, and that council, at least in my experience, has been supportive of, and that's preservation of heritage. Our point in drafting as lengthy and thorough a report was to point out that there are other tools also available. Not instead, but also available, and that's been, that's certainly my understanding of the intent of that report, and that's the lens that I reviewed it through. So before I go on too long, I don't know if I'm answering all of the questions that you'd like me to address. I'm happy to fine-tune my remarks.
Thank you, Tom. Antonetta, did you want to weigh in at all at this point, or? No. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can. I'm grateful for the feedback. But I think, to be clear, we are very clear, and HCD is a tool that we're saying can be effective. We're not recommending that we don't use that. We're saying, let's pair the HCD with another tool and look at the larger area as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that for the committee, and I hope that came through, and just very grateful for all the comments, and we'll work with all of that in our future report to council.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Bothwell.
Just a question for Mr. Herlinski, because I thought I heard him say at the end of his conversation that we prepared the report. Did legal staff prepare this report? And I just want to get some clarification as to how much input you had into it.
The report was prepared by planning. I've had some input into it, but it's certainly a report prepared by the planning department.
And just to confirm, removal of, so actually what I expected was that you would be here tonight to assist us with reviewing the draft bylaw itself, so that we could be prepared to recommend at this point of what would go back to council December 21st. So that's why I'm hopeful that we're at a point, if this motion goes forward to be amended, I want to just clear with you that removal of the interim control bylaw would, and just putting in the language with respect to commencing the Heritage Conservation District study would resolve a lot of the ongoing concerns and would be an appropriate way to move forward if we so choose, if the committee so chooses.
Through the chair, in answer to that question, and without obviously disclosing any of the discussions that properly belong in closed session, I know that from my perspective, the removal of what we've come to call the interim control bylaw aspect, so the 40.1, section 40.1 aspect of this, does resolve a number of the issues that I've understood to be of concern, both to staff and to certain members of the public that we've heard from. There are, substantial portions of the bylaw that remain that can be fine-tuned. It's difficult to do that on the fly. I was not, as you know, aware of the amendment coming forward, but we can certainly undertake to review the rest of the bylaw and fine-tune it to ensure that it meets what we understand to be the intent of the committee to bring it to council.
Thank you. So I just actually sent it to the clerk, Bianca, and the staff member, our committee members with the amendments to it. I don't want to see this delayed any further. I would like to see this go to December 21st. So I would like to see if there's an opportunity for you to review this wording, because you've had this bylaw now for a while. So I've struck out the sections that I believe are controversial. I've amended the map to include the entire Main Street East area. And I appreciate if you have an opportunity, if we even have to take maybe a 10-minute break, I would ask for you to review that and come back with your opinion as to whether the wording of this bylaw would now be suitable to move forward to council, the way that it's worded. Can I ask the chair if we could propose a break under the procedural bylaw to allow legal to review the changes that I've just submitted to the committee?
You will take a 10-minute break. What time is it? It's, yeah, we'll come back at 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you. Recess is over. Tom, you've had a chance to look at this revision. Would you like to speak on it now? Thank you.
I have. I'd be happy to answer the question, and then obviously if there's any follow-up, I'd be happy to answer that as well. I've had a chance to review the bylaw. Thank you for forwarding that to me as I read it, and I've had just a few minutes to read it, but hopefully it's sufficient for at least preliminary comments. The bylaw directs that a study will proceed, that an RFP to retain a consultant to carry out that study proceed essentially forthwith, and then governs the timing of that whole process so that it moves quickly. Based on what I've seen, I don't see issues with that bylaw moving forward. I note, as was indicated before, that it removes what we've taken to call the interim control bylaw component, so the section 40.1 component. These are preliminary comments, so there may be a bit of fine tuning that we may still find in the bylaw, but I don't think there'd be any substantive changes that I would see to recommend in the wording. I know that based on the comments this evening and the two statements that I take it will be provided to the clerk, staff and I will go back and revisit and revise the report and have it focus on the bylaw as revised, assuming, of course, that committee endorses that.
So I have the amended resolution. Should I read it to everybody first so that we've got a grasp of it? Yeah. So we resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee receive the draft report, Main Street East Proposed Heritage Conservation District Bylaw, and study, and whereas in section 40.1 of the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990, authorizes the council of the municipality to undertake a study of any area of the municipality for the purpose of designating one or more heritage conservation districts. And whereas on February 18th, 2020, Council of the Town of Grimsby approved the Main Street East Cultural Heritage Landscape or Cultural Conservation District Study in its 2020 budget. And whereas the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee provides council with advice on identifying, conserving, and promoting heritage within the town of Grimsby, and whereas the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee deems it desirable and expedient to initiate a heritage conservation district study, now therefore be it resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee formally submits to the Committee of the Whole the attached draft bylaw recommended for approval, designating Main Street East Heritage Conservation District Study Area in accordance with Section 40.1 of the Heritage Act. So we've removed the interim control bylaw on this. So that's out. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Can I just ask one clarification in case I misheard the second paragraph of that?
Sure.
I believe you read, and if you could just confirm that the second paragraph reads, and whereas on February 18th, 2020, Council of the Town of Grimsby approved the Main Street East Cultural Heritage Landscape or Heritage Conservation District Study in its 2020 budget?
That's what I have, yeah. So if I didn't read it, yeah. Anyhow, that's correct. Councillor Bothwell?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify that what you read was like a cover to the bylaw, and that the bylaw draft that I sent through to members will be attached with the map.
It doesn't state that in the resolution, though. No.
Because the draft bylaw is what I expected was the draft bylaw as I submitted to you would be amended to be included.
We haven't got that, clerk.
Because what you
Oh,
came
we're-
back
okay.
with is not
Yeah, I know,
what
I know.
sent you.
Yeah, there's no bylaw attached to it today.
Because what I sent you by email is not what you just read. You just read an amended motion, but that's not the draft bylaw that I just sent you.
Is that the document you circulated to all of us just now?
Yes.
So then that was, I think, only page 1.
Yeah,
No, the,
What was read, I mean, what was read was only page 1, but there's 3 missing pages that haven't been read.
yeah. Exactly.
that corrects. We're working on it. So, yeah, the draft bylaw is what Tom read. Where
I just want to make sure we read the full draft bylaw that's included with that cover page you just read.
the clerk is going to read it because she's got it on her screen.
Thank you.
So, do you want me to read it from the beginning?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. Whereas Section 40.1 of the Ontario Heritage Act authorizes the Council of a municipality to undertake a study of any area of the municipality for the purpose of designated one or more heritage conservation districts. And whereas Council of the Corporation of the Town of Grimsby approved the Main Street East Cultural Heritage and Landscape or Heritage Conservation District Study in the 2020 budget. And whereas the area known locally as Main Street East and identified on Schedule A attached to this bylaw includes a collection of residential, commercial, and open space properties that together represent a significant cultural heritage landscape in Grimsby. And whereas the purpose of a heritage conservation district study is to examine the character and appearance of an area to determine if the area should be preserved as a heritage conservation district and to consider and make recommendations with regard to the establishment of a district plan to guide changes to properties located within the district. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Grimsby hereby enacts as follows. 1, the town shall undertake a Heritage Conservation District study of the Main Street East Heritage Conservation District study area in accordance with the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act for the purpose of examining the character and appearance of the area to determine if the area or any part of the area shall be preserved as a Heritage Conservation District and to make recommendations with respect to the content of a Heritage Conservation District plan. 2, and that the formal tendering process to select consultants to undertake the study shall be conducted in accordance with the Corporation of the Town of Grimsby bylaw number 04-119, and that the consultants, once approved by council, shall immediately initiate the Main Street East Heritage District Conservation Study for the area identified on Schedule A. This bylaw shall come into force and take effect immediately upon its passing by council. This Schedule A is the map, proposed study area.
Can you read the Schedule A as well? Because
Sure.
I think that that goes with the map.
Sure. The proposed study area is comprised of all lands and properties with frontage onto Main Street East between Robinson Street to the west and town's eastern limit, and that are within the cultural heritage landscapes identified along Main Street East in Grimsby's special places, town's documents, and endorsed by council in 2015, which includes Queen's Lawn, area of heritage resources and scenic character, neutral Indian burial ground, Grimsby Main Street East, Park School Scenic Highway Heritage Route, Grimsby Main Street Scenic Highway Heritage Route, Hamilton, Grimsby, and Beamsville Electric Railway, and Old Number 8 Highway, First Nations Trail, HG and B Railway.
Thank you.
Good. So just one question, Councillor Bothwell, is the mapping still the original mapping or has that been revised?
The map's been revised to.
The map's been revised. So it says all properties facing onto Main Street?
It says all.
That's what,
Well, can read the motion again. It says all lands and properties with frontage.
all frontage onto Main Street. Okay. And that's how the map reflects that.
If staff have a chance to further review the map prior to council, and if they indicate that the GIS or the mapping is not comprehensive, the intent is that all lands and properties with frontage
Okay.
in between be included. And if it means that they modify the map, then I can certainly give them a version of it, or I'm sure they have the capability to amend it if it needs to be.
Okay. So let me get a mover and a seconder for this resolution, and I'll read it again and indicate that the bylaw was read by our town clerk, which corresponds with the resolution. That makes sense?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so I need a mover.
Can I move it?
Yep.
Thank you.
And a seconder. Olia. Let me read that again. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee received the draft report, Main Street East Proposed Heritage Conservation District Bylaw and Study, and whereas Section 4.40.1 of the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990, authorizes the Council of the Municipality to undertake a study of any area of the municipality for the purpose of designating one or more heritage conservation districts. And whereas on February 18th, 2020, Council of the Town of Grimsby approved the Main Street East Cultural Heritage Landscape or Heritage Conservation District Study in its 2020 budget. And whereas the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee provides council with advice on identifying, conserving, and promoting heritage within the town of Grimsby. And whereas the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee deems it desirable and expedient to initiate a heritage conservation district study. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee formally submits to the Committee of the Whole the attached draft bylaw recommended for approval, designating the Main Street East Heritage Conservation District Study area in accordance with Section 40.1 of the Heritage Act and the corresponding bylaw that was read by our town clerk.
I'm sorry,
All-
Chair, can I
sorry.
just ask one correction? I think because we're submitting it to council now instead of committee of the whole, can we just change committee of the whole to council?
Oh,
Going directly to council, right?
on the 21st, is it not going to?
No,
Oh, it is going to council on the 21st? Okay,
so just instead
correct.
of committee of the whole, it just needs
yes,
to be
yes.
council.
Good,
Thank
good point. You're right. I'll read the corrected paragraph if that's okay with everybody. So that now therefore be it resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee formally submits to council the attached draft bylaw recommended for approval, designating the Main Street East Heritage Conservation District Study area in accordance with Section 40.1 of the Heritage Act. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. That's carried. There we go. We have some, number 8 on the agenda was a late submission, a written delegation, the IBI group. How did we want to handle that? Oh, we just want to receive it. Yeah, we just want to receive it. Did anybody have any comments or questions on it? It was on the agenda. I'll read the resolution then. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsley Advisory Committee received the written delegation from IBI Group with reference to Main Street East proposed Heritage District Conservation Bylaw and Study. I need a mover. Olia. A seconder. Mayor Jordan. All in favor? It's carried. We have some correspondence. And any questions on correspondence? We'll receive that then. Thank you. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsley Advisory Committee received the correspondence with reference to the resolution of support proposed regulations under the Ontario Heritage Act, Bill 108. I'm a mover. Thank you, Olia. A seconder, Council Bothwell. All in favor? That's carried. Our next meeting, the Heritage Grimsley Advisory Committee, is scheduled for January the 12th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Again on Zoom video or electronically. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night and a Merry Christmas.
Isn't there
Thank
a
you.
closed session on the agenda?
That's just no, there's no closed session. It's just it's an agenda. There's no closed session though. It'll always appear. It's a.
Is that the gavel coming down on the end of the meeting?
It's just a placeholder.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's what it is. Placeholder. Template. That's what I was looking for. Template. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.